Factors that to consider in forensic assessment. Well, before that, I just wanted to call your attention to a letter that I was given probably the second day I started at San Quentin. It's actually something that an inmate wrote to another inmate. It was intercepted by a clinician somewhere in the CDCR. I heard that it was intercepted at San Quentin, but I'm pretty sure the DVI people are saying it was intercepted there. They typed it up and passed it around. It is how to malinger. So a little light reading before you go to bed. Don't say I never gave you anything fun. Compounding factors. It's estimated that 85% of incarcerated people have substance abuse problems. So those substance abuse problems, thank you, sir, can affect any type of testing you do. We're off of malingering specific. It can definitely affect malingering, but it can affect any kind of testing that you do. It's estimated that up to 50% of mentally ill people are arrested in their lifetime. And this comes out of the research of Rowland and make someone. 9 to 13% of youth have mental illness and may end up with conduct disorder or antisocial personality disorder. This is from National Institute of Mental Health. So what does that say about us? All right, it's estimated that 65% of criminal offenders have antisocial personality disorder and 25% have psychopathology. So it's estimated that over 25,000 people who are mentally ill are incarcerated in California. Why?
They take such good care.
They closed the hospitals. We take such good care of them. We have 3 hots and a cot when it gets cold. Sure, okay. But this is a problem. So here's the thing. I actually recently wrote an article that was picked up by the International Association of Forensic Correctional Mental Health Workers. I've got a copy of it if you want it. It's in their newsletter for April. And it's the importance of psychological testing in correctional settings. And how I believe it's incredibly important for every correctional setting, juvenile, prison, probation, parole, to have an assessment person or assessment team do the assessment with psychometrics to actually get a good and accurate diagnosis before sending them on for all types of treatment. So there's recommended versus unacceptable tests. Surveyed forensic diplomates asking to rate specifically commonly used tests as recommended, acceptable, or unacceptable in several areas of criminal assessment. This was put out by Lally in 2003. So someone asked, am I going to go over the different tests that should be used for? Here it is. It's at the end. For violence risk, it's recommended that you use the PCLR, they say. That's 63% of them say use that for the violence risk assessment. But it's not a violence risk assessment tool. It's a tool that looks at psychopathy. So that's my argument. That's my 2 cents. What are unacceptable to use? Well, 90% of them said projective drawings. Can't use projective drawings for assessing risk. The TAT, sentence completion, the Rorschach, and the 16 PF. So if you were using any of those for violence risk, stop. Violence risk continued instruments used more than 50% of the time, PCLR, the HCR20, and then the violence risk appraisal guide. So that's what people are using. Sex offender risk assessment instruments used more than 50% of the time are the Static 99 and these other 2 that are not approved by California. Competence to stand trial. They use the McCat and or the MacArthur rather, and the WACE 3. You can see when this publication came out, it was before the WACE 4. But those are the things that people are using. What they find unacceptable, I'm sensing a theme, projective drawings, TAT, sentence completion, and Rorschach. Those things don't use for competency to stand. Mental state at time of the offense, the WACE and the MMPI. Again, we're getting away from the projectives, guys. Inadequate justification for testing. I like this battery. Just because you like a battery that includes the original MMPI and qualitative look at the Rorschach and the WASAR does not mean that you should use that. Move forward. Adapt new tests, especially ones that are valid and reliable. What about I need to prove myself as a psychologist? Yes. So therefore I need to do testing. No. I have extensive expertise using the Ray 15 item test. I have used this for 20 years. I could talk about it backwards and forwards. No. Or the TAT. I could talk about the TAT backwards and forwards. Let's start using it for forensic use. No. What about I charge by the hour? So therefore I should do a whole battery, a 6-day battery. There have been some tests that are discredited out there. And the research shows the Bender has been discredited for neuropsych and personality assessment. Now, we still use the Bender in neuropsych assessments, and the Bender 2 has come out. So I'm thinking that they're talking about the qualitative use of the Bender 1. But the Bender 2 has some really good properties. Actually, I do use the Bender 2. It's got a really good scoring system. Anatomically detailed dolls to assess sexual abuse. How many of you guys have seen these? Yeah. And what happens when someone starts working with them? If you give it to a client, they immediately go for the incredibly large, not anatomically correct penis. Everyone does, because it's the size of a forearm. And it's hanging down, and you're like, what is this? It's like a third leg. Yeah, and so to assume that someone's been sexually abused because they're playing with something that normally doesn't occur on a doll, you know, because most dolls are not anatomically correct, it's a discredited thing. The house tree person for personality assessment, it's a discredited test. I know that you guys like it. Now, if I'm working with children, I might use the house tree person to break the ice, but it's not something that's used anymore for personality assessment. The Rorschach Comprehensive System for Diagnosis. No longer used for diagnosis, used for support. Use it to support your findings. You're using it to support your testing in conjunction with other things, but you wouldn't just give the Rorschach and say, okay, this person has X from it. And the Wechsler scales for personality assessment. I don't care how bad they do at vocabulary, that does not mean that they're anti-social.